really step up and acknowledge that we've got an issue with lawlessness that we want to look at and be creative in solutions about. So thank you all for coming. This is remarkable. Just give yourselves a hand. I just came off of a Music Oregon retreat, going out to Bend and listening to a bunch of musicians out there. And, and they were like, wait a minute, we can do something? I was like, oh, let me tell you about Portland. All right, we have really blazed a trail here, and I'm super excited to keep going with it and make our city the city it should be and make sure that music gets the credit it should get. If everybody hasn't listened to Stumptown Soundcheck, Jamie Dunphy's beautiful podcast on PRP, make sure you do, because it's an incredible episode, and they're going to keep coming every month. Is that right? Yep. All right, and just to give you a taste of that kind of genius, Jamie Dunphy is going to be leading us tonight in the conversation, and we're thrilled to have Mike Schmidt here, and then we're also going to be having, and then also Chris Hubbard from the Musicians Union, who has been spearheading the musicians' loading zone issue. All right, climb up, boys. Take it away.
Well, thanks, Mira. Hi, everybody. First and foremost, I want to apologize to everybody. We're all late because of me. And just before we start, as the district attorney, do you have any power over traffic?
No.
No, okay. Well, friends, hey, I'm Jamie Dunphy, as Mara said. I'm a board member for Music Portland. I am the chair of the Music Policy Council. I have a couple of opening remarks, and then we're going to get going here. But I'm a musician. I'm a political nerd. And I've been excited to be volunteering my time with Music Portland in pursuit of making real, meaningful public policy changes that are making it possible for folks like you to actually be able to live and work in this city for the long haul. Part of that advocacy that the Music Policy Council does on your behalf is build relationships with important voices and important leaders in our community. Because as everyone in this room knows, music is often seen as an afterthought if it's even thought of at all. And so if we are going to have meaningful relationships and meaningful progress, we need to build meaningful relationships. We're going to talk a little bit tonight about what those meaningful relationships have already gotten us and what we've been able to accomplish that no other city in the country has. But first, I'm excited to be joined this evening by one of those really important voices, Multnomah County District Attorney, Mike Schmidt. So, I'm gonna read your bio. It's a good bio.
Good. Yeah.
Mike Schmidt has been the Multnomah County District Attorney since August of 2020. He oversees a staff of 200. Yeah, really great time, all of you guys. Nothing else going on right then. Overseeing a staff of 200, including 81 district attorneys who prosecute people who commit crimes in Multnomah County. Under his leadership, the DA's office is issuing cases at a higher rate than in pre-pandemic levels, working to get the right offenders into evidence-based treatment and supervision programs, embedding attorneys in neighborhoods particularly impacted by gun violence, and building staff capacity to take on auto theft and organized retail theft. Mike moved to Oregon in 2005 to teach public high school in New Orleans. As a teacher, he observed the school-to-prison pipeline firsthand. His students were victims of crimes, witnesses to crime, children of incarcerated parents, and sometimes defendants themselves. And that experience drove Mike to study criminal law at Lewis and Clark Law School, where he then interned for Multnomah County DA's office and began his criminal law career as a deputy district attorney, working on misdemeanors, property crimes, and felonies and drug courts. Almost there, I promise. In 2013,
this is too long.
No, it's wonderful. It's important. In 2013, Mike moved to the state legislature to be counsel for the House and Senate Judiciary Committee, and in 2015, he was appointed by the governor as director of the Oregon Criminal Justice Commission. In this role, Mike oversaw a $90 million budget and spearheaded community. I know, I'm sorry. I'm proud of you if you're not excited to hear about this. Mike has advocated for ending cash bail, collaborated with legislators and health experts on legislation focused on intersection of behavioral health and criminal justice system, and as well as the legislation that decreases racial disparities, and led projects that have made criminal justice system more transparent. And he is continuing this work as district attorney. I would like to also say that Mike Schmidt is a longtime friend of mine, and we have been close for 15, 20 years at this point, where he married one of my dear friends, and I highly approved of the decision, and I'm really excited that he's in office. Ladies and gentlemen, Mike Schmidt.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you.
Mike, if you have just a couple minutes to open some opening remarks.
Yeah. So it's great to be here. You know, like Jamie said, we've known each other for a little while. I first got to meet Mira in Nashville, actually, where we were touring that city to try to learn and see, you know, what's successful there. And obviously, Nashville is Music City, and we're looking and seeing how things have grown there and what they put emphasis on. And we got to tour and hear from some of their public safety leaders. And so I know that that's a critical part of a successful music landscape in any city is public safety. So Jamie's talked about some of our things, but, you know, for me, first and foremost, you know, that is the number one job of the district attorney is to make our community safe so that people can come and frequent businesses, venues, enjoy shows, get home safely and come back. We've had a lot of challenges over the past couple of years, to say the least. But, you know, I think we're working on some of our tougher issues, and I'm excited to talk about some of those things tonight. A lot of misinformation out there right now. So you should all know we prosecute cases every single day. Stolen cars is probably the number one felony that we prosecute. Unfortunately, we've seen a big increase in stolen cars, among other issues that we have going on. So I'm excited to get into those things. But like Jamie said, you know, the approach that I take and the philosophy that I take, and I've had some conversations already in here tonight, is how are we going to change things? When I started as a young deputy district attorney, it was, hey, this is how many years that this person goes to prison. And it's like, okay, they're going to come out of prison. Are they going to be better? Are they going to be less likely to commit a crime? Most people don't get treatment in prison. I got to go around our country and tour other prisons, see how people do innovative things around the United States. But as most of you know, we're the most incarcerated nation in the world, pound for pound. We're not the safest. So there has to be a better way to do things. I've gotten to go to Norway and tour their system, and I can tell you there is a better way to do things. So our focus at the district attorney's office is look at what actually works. How can we leverage the criminal system to get people into treatment, which is something that we don't have enough of, don't have enough addiction treatment, don't have enough mental health treatment. But when people do commit crimes, they should be held accountable. That's what we strive to do. We try to make victims whole, get them restitution every chance we can get, try to make our community safe, and then hopefully work on solutions that will actually make us more safe as a community. So that's what I'm all about, and happy to talk about that here tonight.
Thank you so much for joining us, Mike. Before we dive into some Q&A with Mike, I also want to introduce to you my friend Mont Chris Hubbard over here. Mont Chris Hubbard is the secretary, whatever. What's your formal? Secretary with the Musicians Union Local 99. I was first introduced to Chris when I was working in City Hall. And this is an example that Chris is going to talk a little bit about here and give us some updates on. But the perfect sort of example of the kind of thing that we can create if we build relationships and we get buy-in from elected leaders to help us understand our unique problems and find unique solutions that actually help us. And so Chris was one of these main spearheads behind the musician loading zone program. Portland, the city of Portland is the first in the country to have an official, formally recognized musician loading zone program, meaning musicians who sign up and get a little pass can use the loading zone in front of a venue without getting a ticket. Seems like a very straightforward idea, right? Chris, would you tell us a little bit about that, and I guess a little bit of an update of where we are? And
Sure. I mean, you know, I was a gigging musician and was faced with the same issue that a lot of people have. You know, I'd play Dante's, and there's a loading zone right next to Dante's, right? And I have heavy keyboards and a heavy-ass amp, and I sort of figured, oh, that loading zone is for me, right? It should be for me. I should be able to use it. And I learned that, no, I can't use it unless I pay $500 a year for a permit to use it, which doesn't make any sense for a gigging musician. Maybe if you're full-time, but most of us are not, right? We can't afford a $500 permit. Meanwhile, that space is just empty, sitting there, and I have to park, 3 blocks away, wherever I can find a spot. It's a very, very obvious problem with a pretty obvious solution. So all we had to do was, build a relationship with Jamie, who was then in Nick Fish's office, come in with what we thought the solution was, which was let musicians use this for free. They're either going to park here anyway and get a ticket, or they're going to park 3 blocks away and possibly get their gear stolen, or have to cross 3 blocks of traffic with heavy gear. It doesn't make any sense. This is a really, really common sense solution. We pitched it. Jamie understood. Jamie connected us to everybody else in City Hall that we needed to be connected to. And finally, was it 2017, 2018? We got it. We got buy-in from Peabody. That experience, honestly, taught me a lot about how many people work in politics who are more reasonable than we think. Most people working for our governments just want our city and our county and our region to work well. They're really trying, really are trying their best. They just need help. And it was an example of something where we could provide that help. We made it very easy for them to implement this program and got it implemented. So.
It's a fantastic opportunity. It's a fantastic partnership. And we are working on next steps. Are there, any immediate next steps right now that we're doing?
So Peabody has expressed interest in right now it's still a pilot program, and so we meaning Music Portland and Fairtrade Music and the union are sort of administering it. If you sign up for a permit, that notification comes to actually me, literally to me, and I package a little permit in an envelope and mail it out to you. Peabody has expressed interest in taking over the program, which would be great long term. They, I think, expressed that interest originally 3 months before March 2020, and so things have been sort of on the back burner since then, and they're figuring out how to implement it. So that still hasn't happened. So we're still implementing this as still a pilot program. But once they get that taken care of, Peabody will be in charge of the program. We also had a list of expansion targets. So right now, I think there are 14 or 15 zones that have little placards that say musician loading that you can use if you have permit. Who's got a loading zone permit out there? Anyone got one? Have you used it? Awesome. So we're always looking to expand it. The 15 that we got originally, those were sort of the low-hanging fruit, the ones that were easy to get switched over. There are some more difficult ones that we're still pushing on. And I'm sure some of those are now defunct. But if you have ideas for places you think would be really helpful, get in touch. Let us know.
What's the website to order?
pdxmusicloading.com. Swan Dive, there we go. I tell you, I think right around the corner was on our list of expansions before this was Swan Dive.
Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Sure. Bruce?
Yeah, just make sure it's clear that there's specific ones that have been authorized for this. Not every.
Right, it's not every.
Correct.
Not every loading zone, there's a sign on the ones that say musician loading zone, and when you get your permit, you get it.
Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. Well, that's an opportunity, that was an example of the kind of thing that we're trying to continue to do in every angle of this community. So, District Attorney Schmidt, I'd like to go back to you. Can you tell us a little bit, about what your office is doing right now and how you're approaching sort of this new increased wave of disorder we're having a little bit right now, and specifically, we're thinking about it through the eyes of a musician, and that means that we are folks who have very expensive equipment locked behind very flimsy van doors or our practice spaces. So, how should we be thinking about stuff differently? How can the music industry work better with your office and law enforcement generally? And what are some of the things you want to just sort of say about what's going on right now?
Yeah. Well, first of all, things like the musician loading zone, that is actually a safety intervention, right? Because that means you're not having to walk 3 blocks, leave instruments in the car, and then they get ripped off in between. So thinking of ideas like that is something that we're always interested in. We call it CEPTED, which is environmental design. It's crime prevention through environmental design. And so just thinking of the ways that our world can be shaped. And some of these things are very obvious. CEPTED's kind of a fancy, researchy name, but it's like better street lighting, camera placement, fences in some areas where there might be challenges or people cutting through that allows easy access to quick egresses, things of that nature. And the city of Portland actually has a bureau that will work with you and will come out and look at a situation, a location, and give you recommendations on things like light and camera placement or other types of things. So like that's an example of environmental design or thinking through. You mentioned instruments in cars. That we see a lot of car break-ins. This is a real challenge for us. Please don't leave anything of value in your car, first and foremost. And then on top of that, don't leave your car unlocked if there are valuable things in your car is step 2. Certainly not overnight. Sometimes it's unavoidable because you're running errands. Do your best to, just think through. If you use the trunk, use the trunk if you can. Throw some clothes on top of something so it doesn't look so obvious. Just kind of be aware of your surroundings. Prevention is 99% of the key. Most thefts that happen in Multnomah County, I'll just give you some stats. Of all the thefts reported in Multnomah County in 2022, about 3% will end up in an arrest that goes to having a case referred to my office. So that means 97% of the thefts that happen in Multnomah County will never make it to the prosecutor's office to hold anybody accountable. So step 1 is thinking through prevention and really thinking the things that you can do in advance. Musicians, instruments, right? Other things you can do. And so I asked some of my property crimes attorneys, I was like, hey, what are some tips and other things we can do? You all know the Apple AirTags or AirTag type technology. I know Apple's not the only one that makes them, but there are other ones like that. Put them in your cases in places that maybe are not obvious. Put them in your cars, they're helpful in stolen car recovery. So using Apple AirTags. Keep good photos of your equipment on file so that if your equipment ends up being stolen, serial numbers, things of that nature. When and if your equipment, if it does get stolen, we're going to need to know value of the equipment. So having an idea of how we can find that out, or how much the value is super helpful for us, because the way that our criminal justice system works is things that are valued under $1,000 is a misdemeanor theft. Things that are valued over $1,000 is a felony theft. So that carries with it different responses from the criminal system. We, as prosecutors, can aggregate thefts. So what that means, if the same person is stealing from multiple people, from different victims, we can add all of those in to make one bigger case. But it's really crucial that we need to know the value. So absolutely, if you're the victim of a crime, step 1, report it. And then you should not hear this, but unfortunately we do hear that this happens, is people say, oh, there's nothing we can do because, either the police were defunded or the DA won't prosecute it anyway. No, we prosecute all of those cases. So make sure that you get a police report. That's good for your insurance purposes, but then also if you're told, no, the DA won't prosecute, call my office. Give us the police report number. We absolutely will prosecute those cases and hold people accountable. So I think those are some steps that folks can take.
Is there a role that you think that Music Portland could play in specifically helping represent the music community? As we know what our guitars look like when they were stolen, and it's hard to be a civilian resource perhaps to the prosecutors. But is there a role that we could play as a private partner?
Yeah, well, again, just to use Chris's example, it's like. And I thank you for saying that. You're so right. I think people who get into public service, they're doing it for the right reasons. They want to help. They want to make the community better. But, I am not a musician. I've never been in your shoes. So just having that dialogue and thinking through the way, I might not think about it the way you would. So the loading zones is a perfect example. That probably didn't occur to a lot of elected officials. You bring that to us. So if you have ideas on things that we can do, we are very active. I'm very active in the legislature. So we work with legislators to pass laws to help strengthen things. So if there are things that are specific to the music industry that would have a public safety nexus for law strengthening, absolutely would love to talk about that and other things.
Are there some upstream ways that the music community specifically could be helpful in sort of getting through this period of petty crime and people not feeling safe going out?
Yeah, I think unfortunately we're dealing with a lot of misinformation out there. I mean, but some of it's also true. I mean, there are areas of crime that are spiked. Car theft is one of them. Organized retail theft. We're starting up a task force on both of those issues so that we can really focus in, because we want to focus in. You all probably know this. It's a small number of people that drive a large amount of the crime. It's not everybody's a criminal, right? It's a small number of people that are doing a lot of things. So we're really trying to focus in on those individuals, and a lot of times they're motivated, a lot of times by addiction, but they're trying to sell the things. And so we're also really interested in looking at who are the buyers that are driving that behavior. So we're always looking for information like that, and if you all are seeing, people selling instruments on Marketplace and it's the same usernames, or even brick and mortar locations where musical instruments or other things are being sold out of that are suspicious or stolen, like that's where we really can make a bigger bang for our buck on putting together cases that will drive down crime.
So there's a story, I don't have permission to share specifics, but it was recently announced for a few days there, a local music venue had to completely close. They closed their doors because their insurance company dropped them. Their insurance company specifically dropped them, and none of the major insurance carriers would pick them up, specifically because of the crime statistics in the specific neighborhood that they were in. They eventually did find something at almost 4 times the cost, but we were able to reopen their doors. But we anticipate this being a future thing that musicians music and nightlife tends to be the leading edge of when we see trends in these sort of business trends. I saw a recent announcement that you and Mayor Wheeler are coordinating some efforts towards addressing specific areas and things like that. Is there anything that you could tell us about that's going to look different, like what success looks like if those are successful?
Yeah, so a couple of the areas, we have a new program called the Access Attorney Program. And the idea is, so a lot of folks maybe is not necessarily intuitive. I'm so in the system that sometimes I forget to step backwards and talk through the issues. So there are multiple different agencies that have different controls of different parts of the criminal justice system. It truly is an ecosystem. So it starts with 911 and the Bureau of Emergency Communications, which is city-run. Then, of course, it's the police and their resources, which is also city-run. So mayor has control over the police and how they deploy their resources. So I know that they're recruiting and trying to build a better or stronger police force. We have one of, it's my understanding, for a metropolitan area our size, one of the lowest staffing levels of police agencies around the country. So that's a challenge for us, especially as those officers are running from violent crimes and dealing with more gun violence. So it kind of spreads them thin. But we need the police officers to actually build the cases, put together the evidence, and then send prosecutions over to our office. That's when our attorneys first get the police reports. And then the courts decide who gets held in jail and who gets released in jail. The sheriff runs the jail. So there's multiple parts to the system. So the mayor and I have targeted specific hot spots around our community. One is Old Town. So now we have a deputy district attorney who is actually assigned to be in Old Town, working with business owners, working with community-based organizations, folks who are doing a lot of the really good outreach like Central City Concern and Transition Projects, Inc., and all those areas that are serving people as well. So if you're a business person in that area, there is a deputy district attorney that is assigned to be in that community. So reach out. We'll make sure that Maggie Burgess gets connected to you. And she can do things like walk through your business and give you tips on, cameras, positions, things like that, or connect you to the city bureau that does that SEPTED work I talked about. We're also focusing in East Portland. And those two prosecutors are located in areas where we're seeing a lot of gun violence, especially with young people. So they're working a lot with schools. But also business owners and people who are dealing with, what we see a lot of theft and car stealing out there. we're in budget season right now, so we're about to add another one of these positions if the budget goes through, like I anticipate it will, which will be an attorney assigned to St. John's and then the Elliott neighborhood. So we're excited to get a resource out into those two areas as well, to just kind of have that face-to-face connection with people. Because what safety needs to look like, it looks different in every place. Old Town's issues are not the same as East Portland's issues, right? And so having an attorney that is like specifically assigned there to work with business owners, work with community-based organizations, and then be a problem solver. You know, in St. John's, I was up in St. John's and talking to a lot of business owners up there who are really upset, and rightfully so, because what they pointed out was they're like, look, we understand when, you know, somebody in a face mask or they're all masked up and they smash a window and they run away and they're not arrested. Like, we get it. You don't know who it is, and the odds of you finding that person and prosecuting them are probably not very high. But they're like, but what about the person who we know who it is? And they're here, like right now, back of the room, that guy. Right. You know, they're like, what do we do about that guy? And I'm like, yeah, exactly. You know, so it wasn't like that, but it was kind of like that. And so it's like having a prosecutor in the community, because normally we don't get the police reports unless an arrest is made. So if we're not in the community, we're not building those relationships and hearing about those things, because we sit in the courthouse. We're in court every single day. We're not out there hearing about these issues. And then when you call police, you're going to get a different police officer in different times. So having a prosecutor that is in the community and building those relationships so that the business owners can say, yeah, that's him right there. And it's this case and this case and this case and this case. Now we can put it together. And, you know, to be quite frank, right, we're dealing with folks, most of the people we prosecute have serious mental health issues and serious addiction issues. And so sometimes it's about leveraging our system to get people into treatment. But we can do that. We can work with probation officers. We can work with parole officers. We can file charges. We have drug courts. We have mental health courts. Sometimes incarceration is what needs to happen for people to get off the streets so we can be safe. But frequently, we can actually do an intervention that will get at what the issue is. Because most people I talk to in Portland, we're not the lock 'em up, throw away the key community. We're the, like, I just don't want somebody else to be a victim like I'm the victim today community. That's who I think we are. And so that's what attorneys in our community can do to work with you.
Well, to that extent, or to that same end, I'm going to start that whole sentence over. To that end, to what extent does your office have, I guess, not maybe control, but collaboration in terms of helping the police prioritize the kinds of, or the consistency with which they are policing communities? The specific example I'll give is sometimes a violent crime will happen to a business or a musician or somebody in our community, and a police officer simply will not show up. And at the same time, we have data that shows consistently since 2020, police officers are responding to almost 2,000 noise complaints per month. Understanding that most of those are happening at night, and an overwhelming majority of them are happening under professional music and are providing inconsistent policing standards. What kind of influence are you working on the back end of, like, the data side of police, or do you have that kind of relationship with the mayor to help guide that?
So it really is. It's not a formal authority, right? Yeah. I can't go in and say, hey, police, do this, not this. That's not, that is the mayor's purview and the police chief's purview. I talk with the police chief on a regular basis. We meet once a month at 7 a.m. In his office and with his team and my team, and we just talk through a lot of these issues. So that's kind of how I can be helpful. And like, we just had our monthly meeting this week, I think. Maybe last week. Anyway, it runs together. Time runs together. But we're there, and so I talked to the chief. I was like, hey, chief, you know, we got a lot of people who are really excited to be coming back downtown this summer. And a lot of people are coming from all over the country to visit Portland again. And we need to protect that. We need to make sure that people are safe. You know, what can we do about those things? And so we're talking about strategies. And, you know, one of the things that he said, he's like, yep, I totally agree. And, you know, he's got the strength of force that he has, right? And so he has to prioritize and think through things. But we're talking about, can we get more officers doing a walking beat, right? Be out on their shoes and walking around and being visible and seeing people. And maybe we target specific times and weekends and things like that to have more strength in some of these places. So those are the kinds of things and conversations that we can have, and that we do have on a regular basis. But a lot of the authority, of course, lies with the city.
Awesome. Well, that's the end of my list of questions. Chris, did you have any questions? Or are there any questions in the audience? I dare try to take select few. Missy, I trust you. I love you all, but I trust her.
Could you address, and I also want to say I'm the mother of someone who spent 17 years in a Texas prison. So I really appreciate you caring about the fact that we can't just throw people away. And once they become institutionalized, the percentage of people who go back is so high. So that said, how are you working? I know you talked a little bit about different neighborhoods, but how are you working for the Albina district? I work in the Albina district. There's so much intention going into that neighborhood, and we have so many musicians who are playing a genre of music. I know this has already been brought up, but I just wanted to ask again, like, in terms of culturally specific approaches to really making neighborhoods safe, but also allowing them to flourish and have music that's live and local and involved, in the neighborhood. Can you just address that a little bit more?
Well, I really appreciate the question because now my wheels and my gears are turning, right? You asked, how can we collaborate? One of the things that we have is a community policy advisory committee. And so we have members from different communities that represent different interests and different issues. Immigrant communities, people of color of different races, ethnicities who have different specific issues that help teach us and have us think about things. And I'm thinking, all right, well, now we need to get Jamie on our committee or somebody from this group on our committee to represent music. And what are the blind spots that we have that we could be collaborating on, and things that you all would think of that we haven't yet. So that's one way that we work with community to be culturally sensitive and specific, and think through how our policies and enforcement actions have impacts on the community that we serve. So specifically in Albina, we do work with different groups of folks and community organizations, but we don't have that prosecutor in the community resource available to us right there. So we're relying on the police agencies to send us cases, and when they send us cases and make arrests, we're prosecuting those cases and making sure that those folks are held accountable. But that's kind of our role in it, but I think there's room for more collaboration there.
Bruce.
Yeah, I used to spend a lot of time kind of representing the musicians in troubled situations, and one of them was a band that had played a festival down in Lane County. That the festival promoter sent them a rubber check for many thousands of dollars for that particular festival. At that time, I don't know if they still do it, that was a felony. And all I had to do was have a musician contact your office, your equivalency in Lane County, and that band got paid in 2 days. Because it was a felony against that promoter.
Yeah.
Does Portland have anything, or the Multnomah County have anything like that, or any tools to help protect musicians from those types of circumstances?
Yeah. So same laws, state laws. So we have forged checks, fraudulent checks. So we have laws on the books. Also, I'm very interested in prosecuting wage theft cases. That's something that we're working with the Bureau of Labor Industries to build, how do we put together cases? One of the challenges in that area for us is, so in your example that you gave, if you called the Portland police, you're not likely to get a police officer to come out and necessarily investigate that. They might say, oh, file an online report.
They contacted the AD's office directly. That was the instructions.
Yeah. And if that happens here, anybody is absolutely welcome to contact our office directly. We would probably work with a law enforcement partner because we're not the investigative agency. We rely on police officers to do that work and put together the evidence for us to prosecute. And there's legal reasons for that. We don't want to be our own witnesses in a case So we rely on investigations that we can call them as witnesses in our cases. But you could absolutely report that to our agency, especially if you tried the police and you said, hey, I didn't get anywhere with this. Like, call our agency and say, hey, this happened. We're out, thousands of dollars, and we'd absolutely prosecute that.
I've got a follow-up on that, actually, because the Musicians Union and a bunch of unions and other worker advocacy groups are working with BOLI on on creative ways to expand their reach, because BOLI is one of many incredibly underfunded governmental organizations. BOLI, by the way, the Bureau of Labor and Industries, that is sort of tasked with, among other things, enforcing wage violation laws and other laws like that. And we've been working with them to try to figure out how groups like unions and, again, other worker advocacy groups can help BOLI enforce those laws, if it's just as far as reporting or building connections. Are there ways that groups like unions and like Music Portland can work with the DA's office in that sort of thing with wage theft?
So the challenge for us, and so we're working with BOLI too, and what I mean by that is we send our prosecutors down to their agency to help train them on how to make a criminal case. Because BOLI does administrative law, right? Administrative violations, which in the criminal system, it's a higher burden to prove. We need to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that somebody committed a crime. They don't need to prove that high of a case to just, have an administrative finding that somebody made a violation. So we are training up, we're working with BOLI to train them on how to make criminal investigations. And that means that we are working with them to subpoena bank records, which is a power and authority that BOLI has that they don't use very much. And it's kind of an unused muscle for them. So again, for us, we needed an investigatory agency. But yes, if you had that happen to you in Multnomah County, we want to hear about that case, because then we could maybe work with BOLI and say, hey, this is how we do that investigation. This is what we need you to do. Let's put together a case.
For folks in this room who maybe aren't familiar with the extent of the problem with wage theft, and I didn't ask you if you had these stats, do you happen to have stats about how pervasive wage theft is compared to, say, shoplifting or?
So I don't have Multnomah County stats for that,
Yeah.
right? Because it really is something that is not being criminally investigated and prosecuted. And so we're trying to change that right now. And I'm working with Christina Stevenson, who's the new director of BOLI, to get that done. But I've seen national studies, and it's like 3-to-1. It's like, if you look at the chart of wage theft and how much that happens, it dwarfs all other types of theft combined.
And you're probably not an insurance expert, but if wage theft is particularly prevalent in a neighborhood, does that drive insurance rates up for the clubs?
I don't believe it does.
No, it doesn't?
No, I
Imagine.
don't think it does. I don't think
That
it
doesn't
does.
seem fair.
Weird.
All right. Derek.
Mike, thanks for being here. Really appreciate the opportunity and the audience. As musicians, I think we learn at a very young age that we live in this constant context of tension between members of the community and us. We need places to practice our instruments, we need places to rehearse our projects, we need places to record, and we need places to perform. And that is something that often results in threats of our gear being confiscated, constant complications about where we can do that, and ideally becoming adept at that diplomatic relationship with the community. Meanwhile, in your role, I understand you're operating in the face of murder and gun violence and disproportional effects on young black men, homeless community, etc. Next to that, we've got these issues that can often seem like they're dwarfed by those kinds of things, but they're very real problems for us adjacent to all of that. Last year, there was a busker downtown who was probably out of his mind, but every day for hours on end was performing blistering electric guitar solos for hours on end. I also serve on the noise review board and was the recipient of agonizing testimony from dozens of individuals who were losing their minds because they couldn't work, they couldn't sleep, Then there were retail business owners whose customers were being driven away. In that context, on the noise review board, we basically told Paul Van Orden to go give this guy a ticket because Paul's typical approach is mediation, intervention, negotiation, etc. Once that ticket was written, we had people coming back and testifying again, and these people are, some of them are in tears, some of them are barely controlling their rage. And part of myself as a musician is just going, fuck, this is the intense stuff that we have to deal with on a regular basis. Meanwhile, the tickets are written, and what we're hearing is that the district attorney's office is not pursuing those charges. And we, as a consequence, there's no way to carry any of this forward. It eventually stopped. And the reason it stopped is because one of the residents of those buildings finally snapped, and he tore down the fire escape with a fire extinguisher and attacked this guy and chased him away, and the guy never came back. No other intervention from any resident, any business owners, constant attempts to talk to this guy, all the stuff that we're trying to do right, eventually it's vigilante activity that changed the problem. And it's something where it feels very dangerous for that to happen in a community, because that is stoking the fires of something that is constantly a problem for all of us. And it felt like we were really left out by you guys.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I really appreciate it. So that's exactly the type of thing. If you're being told the district attorney's office won't prosecute, call the district attorney's office. Don't take anyone else's word for it. We have a case right now that is not that case, but it was a tandem who were similarly downtown, loud, and we've got them with 32 charges, I believe, at this moment that we're prosecuting. Same exact fact pattern that you just gave with the other guy. So, I mean, that's an example of us prosecuting those cases. So
The first question is, why not this guy? And why 2.5 years later, finally those folks?
yeah, well, so I mean, I think that's where people need to call our office directly. When I saw that case of the one that we're prosecuting, I was like, yeah, of course, we'll prosecute that case. So, I mean, I don't know what the disconnect was before that, but if somebody is saying the district attorney's office won't prosecute, call the district attorney's office.
I'll be honest, I'm learning today that I can call the district attorney's office.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Liz, my communications director's here with me tonight. I return those phone calls myself sometimes. Liz returns those phone calls. Other members of my staff return those phone calls. We want to be partners in keeping this community safe and livable. So, there have been times, so you said over the last 2.5 years, there have been times when we were literally in the throes of COVID and we were, the police were trying not to arrest people. We were trying not to bring people into jail, things like that. There was a time where the lowest level misdemeanor cases, we were trying not to bring those in. We're also in the middle of a defense attorney crisis. So every case that we prosecute that uses a defense attorney for that is one that we don't have for other things. Right. That is still, the defense attorney crisis thing is still an issue that's going on. The COVID thing is not. So that could have been some of the reasons why, that was being said, but not a philosophical reason or anything else. And if it gets to the level of, over and over and over again, we want to be partners. So please, anybody in here, call our office and ask.
Last question of the night.
Yeah, so just sort of on the heels of this, or dovetailing or whatever, you can call it whatever you like. I'm curious, this is the first I'm hearing call the district attorney's office directly. And there are cases where people try to get in touch with law enforcement and they are unresponsive or under-responsive or it takes a really, really long time for them to be responsive. You mentioned St. John's as one of them, and that is an area where it feels like there's one guy working in the entire area. Yeah. And there are venues there, right? And there are people that live there, and the responsiveness, in my experience, from law enforcement is so extended, right? So I guess my question is, how is the information getting out there in terms of who do I call? Who's going to be responsive? How do I know what I have is going to be responded to by the correct person? Because I really appreciate a lot of what you're saying, and this is also a room full of maybe 20 people, which is not going to necessarily spread that word like wildfire, right? So, so how does the greater community know who to call, when to call, and what to call about, right?
Yeah. So we are not an investigative agency or emergency response agency. So if you're in an emergency, you don't want to call the district attorney's office. I'm not going to hop in my car and be able to do that. So the when to call us is the thing happened, you've made the report, and now you're either being told the DA is not going to prosecute that, or nothing's happening, you've heard nothing, and you're like, what's going on? If you call our office, the thing to do is we need the report number. That's critical information. Ideally, the date and the time, that helps us narrow down. We can look that up in our system and find that police report. Now, a lot of times those police reports have never even been sent to our agency. And so we'll say, well, this is why we don't have a case, because we haven't gotten this. But we can look at the police report, and that can prompt us to call the police officer ourselves and say, hey, Officer Schmidt, what's going on with this case? We're talking to the victim. They want prosecution. And sometimes, the police officer is missing something, video or some other evidence. So we say, hey, can we get that evidence? And a lot of times the victim will say, hey, I'll send it to you myself, right? So the ball can get dropped over here, but absolutely, if you're getting nowhere with that, call our office, and we might be able to find the police report and bring a case to life that otherwise we never even knew existed.
So if there was real quick, so if I'm not getting response from the police department, if that's who do I go to the police chief, the police chief's office? Yeah. I mean, is that the place to go? If I'm concerned with a lack of response from law enforcement, is that the place to go?
Yeah,
if
the
it's
mayor.
If it's a lack of the police, once they have a police report, then we can start to help and make sure there's connections. But if you're getting nothing, it's city.
So if I'm finding somebody broke into my car, stole my rig, and I'm not, there's no response, I go to the police chief's office. Once I finally have that, then I go to you. Great, thank you. I just want everybody I want everybody to know that you're a resource.
Yeah.
And that would be great to know.
And thank you for the question so much, because that's really why we want our attorneys to be out in the community and not just behind the courthouse walls, because then we start to have these conversations and make these connections, and then we are a resource. We're like, hey, we can help you with that. And, sometimes, there are times when we don't have enough evidence to prosecute a case, right? But if we know who did it, but maybe for legal reasons there are, barriers to us proving it, but we have a different case, we can do other things. Like, we can be problem solvers. And I think that's hopefully what you all take away from this, is we can be a resource and want to work with you all to make sure that you're safe and that, we're doing everything to support the music industry in Portland that we can.
I'd said you were the last question, but I lied. She's going to be the last question.
Hey, thanks so much for being here, by the way.
Yeah, thank you.
So I'm thinking about what the community can do for itself to help out folks on the public side. And it occurs to me that with vehicle theft, VIN numbers are put into a federally managed database so that people can track stuff. Most gear has a serial number. If we have a crew of very IT-minded, software-minded people within our community, would it make sense to build a Portland musician database of this is my amplifier serial number, and if this is found at a pawn shop, it's mine? Would that be something that could then provide evidence for the DA's office to then prosecute the sellers of the gear?
Let's have that conversation, because pawn shops, right? When anybody is pawning something, there are requirements in our area that have to be fulfilled. They have to get ID, they have to get a thumbprint, and they have to write down something about, hey, this is my grandma gave it to me for my birthday, right? And so that's super good evidence for us when the thing is actually stolen, because those things, we can find the person who did the selling, and then we can disprove their bullshit excuse about where they got the thing. But that's a really interesting idea. I would want to have that conversation with my investigators and think through, like, would this be a helpful database? I mean, my gut reaction is, yeah, that could be super helpful and really great.
Let's plan on having that conversation.
Yeah, let's have that conversation. Good idea.
Chris.
Yeah, that's an amazing idea, and I just want to like lift that up as something that I hadn't thought about, Mike hadn't thought about, Jamie probably hadn't thought about, a lot of people in this room probably hadn't thought about, you thought about, and because we have this community, that idea can get out there and actually start making its way to where it needs to go. And it's an example of an idea that is gonna need like community buy-in, people to build that. Mike's not gonna take all the license numbers and put them down.
I'm on it.
But I just wanted to take a moment to plug to like things that have sort of come up, and the concept of, I think a lot of us have found in the past couple of years that we have had to build community outside of government and community systems outside of government. Government can do a lot of things, but government is massively underfunded, according to some people, according to my opinion, right? Like, we have a governmental organization, Bully, that's in charge of enforcing wage and hour laws, that should have a budget that's 10 times what it is. So there are things that we can do as community to help each other. And so speaking as a member of the musicians union, like our union, one of the things we do is contract enforcement, so that you're not on your own. When you have a contract, first of all, use a contract, people, use a contract. But when you have that contract, even if you use a contract, even if you do it the right way, right? If you're by yourself, it's really hard. It's really hard to go up against a venue and say, hey, you fucked me over, where's my money? But if you have a community, like a union, or another community, right? You have the power of all those people in that community saying, hey, you fucked this person over, pay them, right? Similarly, like insurance is a thing where group insurance is a better idea. Our union has instrument insurance policies. You should have your instruments insured. Mike mentioned it. I hope everyone here has their instruments insured, especially if you're playing out. Get those things insured.
Yeah.
Check out our insurance policies if you're curious. But also, like, liability insurance, venues that are stuck on a corner that's in a high crime neighborhood, they're stuck on that corner and they have to deal with the specifics of that neighborhood and the crime in that neighborhood. If we had like group liability insurance, say either for musicians or for venues or for both, right? We could have much more affordable insurance together than every venue on their own and every musician on their own. Woo!
All right,
Group health
folks.
insurance too.
I want to thank Mike Schmidt, our Multnomah County District Attorney. Please give him a round of applause. Very few elected officials are willing to come and spend time in a dark, creepy room with us. So we want to thank you.
Am I allowed to say I played the swan dive now?
Absolutely.
I can say that. Okay. Good.
You headlined the slide.
I headlined at the swan dive. All right, great.
All right, thanks. Thanks everybody for coming out, and tip your bartender. He's a sound guy, and drink more.
And a musician.
And a musician. All right, thanks everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
And if you love this guy, seek him out. He could use your help.
Yes. Thank you, Mayor.
Where do we fit? There's a musician I